wanted to talk to you because myself and many of my colleagues in the film industry are really confused to follow the every beat of something that seems to be changing, on the dime every day. And I wondered if you could help give us some grounding that creative folks can absorb, right? Not too wonky, to help make sure that everybody understands what the state of play is. So, in order to get started, I just wonder, can you let folks know why I'm talking to you? What's your street cred to be able to answer these questions?
So I am a former FTC commissioner, which means that I was one of the up to five people who ran the Federal Trade Commission. My chair for all the time I was at the Federal Trade Commission was Lena Khan. And I was one of the commissioners who was voting whether or not to challenge, for example, an illegal merger. I also, for 3 years, had it as my job to enforce the old consent decrees, the old settlements that other people had agreed to as a condition for letting old mergers through.
So you are in fact the right person to answer the questions I have for
I'd
us
like to
today.
think I am. If not, I'd like to meet that person. So yeah, that'd be good.
All right, let's start at the top. Can you, in the plainest English possible, just catch us up? What is the state of play currently with the merger?
As of mid-August 2026, you have two strong lawsuits to block the merger. The one that's getting the most press headlines is the lawsuit led by Attorney General Rob Bonta of California on behalf of himself and 11 other state attorneys general, alleging that this merger hurts competition in three markets. One of them is for wide release films in general. The other is for what you might call a blockbuster film. So I think they refer to it as tentpole films. And the third one has to do with competition for cable channels. So in addition to each Paramount and Warner Brothers or owning one of the big two legacy television studios, they also own a gazillion cable channels, each of them. And so the third argument, which I kind of think is the sleeper argument in the state AG's lawsuit, is basically saying, hey, look, company A owns a gazillion cable channels, company B owns another gazillion cable channels. Those channels will probably be more expensive to the Comcasts of the world, et cetera. And I don't have a soft spot in my heart for Comcast. I do have a soft spot in my heart for people who pay cable bills. So if it's more expensive to the Comcasts and Charters of the world, it's going to be more expensive to regular consumers who may not watch a film every month, but probably do turn on cable. So that's the state AG's lawsuit. What has happened with that lawsuit, before I get to the other lawsuit, is that the federal judge, Judge Martinez Olguin, has granted a state attorney general temporary restraining order that hit pause in the merger. Then she hit pause again for another 2 weeks. And then, after all sorts of kicking and screaming, Paramount agreed, basically changed course and said, look, we will agree to hit pause on this merger beyond even when the judge stipulated, up until at the latest June of next year, or until the judge issues her decision on this case. So in other words, whatever's the earliest, I said latest, whatever's the earliest, either the judge will decide on the merits of the case, whether this merger proceeds, or June of next 2027. There's another lawsuit around the writers who are affected by this merger. And they are alleging another three injuries to different markets. So one is around the injuries to TV writers, all right, where they're basically saying, look, like we have all these statistics about what it looks like to buy a script, to sell a script. We have all these statistics about the conditions that writers are given, when they do this. And we find that with television, number one, number two, with screenwriting. And by the way, I didn't fully understand that screenwriters were film writers and TV writers are TV writers. That was something I, as a lawyer, did not know. I learned that, fun fact, for me. And then lastly, there's a third market for all-around deals. And so the Writers Guild alleges, alongside some high-powered law firms and the former Attorney General of New Jersey, a high-powered lawyer named Matthew Platkin, that there's going to be injury to these three markets. So right now, what we have are two lawsuits alleging injuries to six overlapping but distinct markets, and the merger is on pause until at the latest June of next year.
Perfect. So this last few weeks, we're recording this on August 19th. So this last few weeks, I've been feeling bombarded by a full court press, right? Every day there's a new story in the trades or in mainstream press, and a whole series of op-eds have been written. And what I see are a bunch of very wealthy people who are the authors of these op-eds. And in more cases than not, probably in all cases, they have a financial interest in this deal going through.
Yes.
Just
Yes.
saying what I'm observing. So they keep trying to put pressure on the AGs that they should make a deal. And make a deal is like language that people in Hollywood love. Everybody likes to make a deal, right?
Right.
But what
Right.
does it actually mean to make a deal? And is it a good idea?
So let me first validate the first thing you said, which is really, really, really important. It is, I know what time it is. I know that these things called ethics seem kind of quaint in 2026 with all the overt corruption and bribery going on in this world. But you have seen a lot of people writing in support of the merger or in support of a deal who do not disclose that they have, investments to the tune of millions, if not billions of dollars in these companies. I think Jamie Dimon came out in support of the deal, any number of people. And embarrassingly, these people are not pointing out that they literally will make money if the deal goes through, which is a standard journalistic practice and basic ethics for a writer of words in the universe. Okay, so everyone needs to kind of put a little asterisk next to these op-eds and just throw it into whatever search engine you use. Does this person have a financial interest in the Paramount Warner Brothers deal? Usually, like you said, the answer is yes. Secondly, we're not talking about like cool deals, right? Like we're not talking about deals where, hey, we're going to do this film. Like, all right, you're in for this amount. You're a limited partner for this amount. We got this, screenwriter who's going to do this. We got this director. Let's make a deal. That is not what is happening. Okay. And what's happening is do a deal means let the merger go through with these conditions. Okay. And look, like, obviously, I have a viewpoint about this merger, right? Obviously, I think this, and my main beef with this merger is I think a lot of people, working people in small businesses, blue collar people, are going to lose their jobs as a result of this merger. And actually, an hour before we taped this, the 120-day report was submitted to the LA County Board of Supervisors, predicting like 4,500 direct job losses and thousands of indirect and downstream job losses as a result of this merger, right? So, look, this is where I'm coming from. I have views, so take that into account. But I also have experience, and the main thing I want to communicate on the basis of this experience is that this middle Narnia of, look, you're not going to let the deal through cleanly, and you're not going to block the deal. You're going to let the good stuff through and stop the bad stuff. That is a mirage. That is Narnia. It does not exist. And there is both quantitative evidence that these settlements fall apart, go unenforced, are ignored, or if they are fixed, are maybe fixed like 16 years down the road of something bad happening. And that people shouldn't look at this as the best of both worlds.
If a deal were struck, as everyone and their dog is trying to pressure right now, what does it take to enforce any conditions that are made? I see that with the three theater chains that have now come out, the agreements that they've made with them are for 3 years. 3 years goes like
Right,
that in filmmaking,
right.
right?
Yeah.
So that it just doesn't seem
That's
to
like a
me.
film. That's like the
Yeah,
life cycle
exactly.
of a film. Right.
Exactly. So it doesn't, none of this is really like adding up to my brain. And so I wanted
Yeah.
to crawl into your brain and have you explain to me
I,
what do
I don't
you
recommend that,
understand?
but yes, I could give you some tidbits. So first, you actually touched on something else which I don't want to touch on now. Let's touch on it next, which is why people are cutting these deals. Because I think it's very because a lot of people are seeing this, they're like, oh, these folks support the deal. They support the merger. That's why that's actually not what's happening. And so just put a pin in that for a second, though, and let's talk about the three reasons why these settlements, doing a deal is a mirage, is not a real thing if you're worried about jobs and work and making films and keeping our American film industry and TV industry alive the way it should be. So let's just talk about how this stuff works. Okay, so let's say there's a merger challenge that FTC does, which is different than the state attorneys general. Okay, because the FTC, like the DOJ, has a budget for competition, for merger reviews that is many times the size of a California or a New York. And those are the largest attorney general offices or a Texas budget. Okay. So, best case scenario, most resources. What happens is these mergers are put forward. Some of our predecessors cut a deal, they do a settlement. Maybe it involves spinning out some portions of the business. Maybe it involves changing your behavior, like, oh, we will license out this software, at this reduced royalty, or maybe we will promise not to do this bad thing that you thought we were going to do, right? Here's what happens. Number one, this stuff piles up, right? Most of these settlements aren't for 3 years. They're for longer periods, right? 10 years, 20 years even. And so these things start piling up, right? And as you might expect, most of the lawyers in any antitrust shop, be it the FTC, DOJ, certainly a state attorney general, most of those lawyers are out there trying to stop new bad things from happening. Okay? What this means is most lawyers are out there trying to stop the new deals coming through, the new mergers coming through that are going to break the law, which means that a minority of people at any of these offices is actually like just has as their job to review the old settlements to make sure they're being complied with, right? So structurally from the outset, you have under-resourcing. The under-resourcing is such that what these individuals mostly rely upon are the companies themselves disclosing violations or third parties disclosing violations. Now, think about this for a second. These two juggernauts, and it's usually two juggernauts, merged such that they control even more of the market. If you are outside of those juggernauts and you're getting screwed by those juggernauts, are you going to be excited about reporting wrongdoing to the federal government or state government? Or are you going to be scared? Are you going to have a lawyer on retainer who knows what to share and what not to share with the federal government and the state government? Because sometimes if you disclose a piece of evidence, it might turn out to be kind of important for whatever case follows. And so are you going to be comfortable disclosing those violations to those enforcers? Are you going to have a lawyer to help you navigate that process? And the answer is usually no, right? So you have an under-resourcing problem, and you have just a functional information flow problem where it's really hard for these enforcers to just police this growing pile of settlements. Now, layer on top of this the fact that state attorneys general, by and large, are publicly elected. All right? Now, there's positives and negatives of this. I don't have religion on what I like or what I don't. But if you're a publicly elected state official, right, who wants to win future elections, what are you going to devote your staff resources to, right? Are you going to devote them to blocking new mergers that are hurting your constituents, that might hurt your constituents tomorrow that are in the headlines already, right? Or are you going to devote a bunch of staff to policing the old settlements that maybe the guy or woman you beat in the last election entered into, right? So not only is there an under-resourcing problem, there is a wrong incentives problem, both for information flows into the people meant to police these settlements and for actually taking action on those settlements, right? Then there's just the under-resourcing problem of the affirmative staff to actually go in and file in court, alleging that the consent decree has been broken, asking for an injunction to stop it. Okay, so basically, the onus shifts in terms of following the law away from the companies to the enforcers. The default prior to a merger is the merger doesn't happen unless it's blessed. To just show you how crazy this stuff is, to tell you about this, my closest experience was this crazy gas station deal. Okay, so like I'm purposely choosing a very simple example just to show people how these deals are BS. They're not worth the ink they're printed on. Okay. 2018, 7-Eleven buys like 1,000 Sunoco stations across the country. Okay. FTC considers this in 2018, and they're like, all right, guys, we're going to let this thing through, but there's a couple markets where you have to divest. You can't buy, and you actually have to affirmatively sell some gas stations. But then there's just a list of gas stations, list of markets and gas stations where we're just literally for 10 years, we don't want you to buy these. And so if you want to buy these specific gas stations, which we are listing out in this consent order, you need to pick up the phone, call us, and tell us first. And one of those gas stations was in St. Petersburg, in the Tampa area, all right, Florida. Like, little did you expect we would be in St. Petersburg. We are. Okay, so there's this gas station in St. Petersburg that 7-Eleven has put on a list with all its fancy lawyers. And 7-Eleven may seem like down home, no, they got billion-dollar company, very fancy lawyers, agree in writing, Inc. We shall not buy these gas stations without notifying the FTC first. Guess what they did with that gas station in St. Petersburg, Marsh?
Did they buy it,
They
Alvaro?
bought it. And guess when they bought it? How long after this deal did they buy it?
Within the year?
Couple months.
Couple of months.
So in other words, their deal gets considered by FTC. They have literally promised in writing, we shall not buy these gas stations without notifying the FTC first. What do? They buy it, and they buy it in months. And in fact, so much time elapses between them buying it and the FTC finding out that they not only can buy it, they can operate it, and they can sell it. In the intervening time before the FTC finds out. Why did the FTC find out? Do you think we have, we actually, this is part of the rubric that everyone needs to understand here. The best resourced antitrust agencies in the country, which are FTC and DOJ, state AGs are far below it in terms of the resourcing, do not have regional presences, right? So FTC, does not have a Florida office. They have a regional office in Atlanta, which is charged with policing this whole region of states. You should look at the budgets for these offices. They are generally flat or going down year by year, adjusted for inflation. So anyways, we didn't find out. Why didn't we find out? Because we don't have staff that can go and check on these things in person, or even over the phone. Like, we rely on reports from these companies. And what do the companies do? What do we allege? I'll just say, what do we allege they did in our lawsuit? They lied to us. They filed false compliance reports for years saying, oh yeah, we're spick and span on this stuff. We're totally in compliance. When in reality, they were unquestionably not in compliance because they bought the gas station they said they wouldn't buy. We filed this lawsuit in 2023 in December. Guess how long it took to reach a settlement where 7-Eleven's like, all right, we bought the gas station. We said we weren't supposed to buy it. Guess how long that took?
No idea. 2 years?
2 years. 2 years. Okay. So it takes months to build a case, and then it takes years to resolve it. And all this could have just been blocked potentially in 2018. Okay, so these settlements fail. The companies that are spun out end up often failing and then getting bought up by the original companies, right? The behavioral remedies are ignored, and prices go up, in all these circumstances. So now let's take this structure, this experience, this academic research, and set it alongside what some of these folks who I think some of these folks are operating in or trying to operate in good faith, I'll just say they're operating in good faith. I think because they don't understand how this stuff functions. Some of the conditions that people are asking for are exponentially more complex than that gas station example, which again took 5 years to discover, roughly, right? I'm just going on the public documents here, not using any private information, and then 2 years to fix. Okay, so if you look at the Directors Guild and the IATSE, the IATSE, which is the labor union that represents the craftspeople, the technicians, the folks who actually physically make movies, right? The costumes, the makeup, camera operators, etc. They came out with this letter and basically saying, hey guys, look, like this merger being, this being in limbo isn't good for our folks. And I'm sympathetic to that. Okay. I understand, we can talk more later about this, but I'm sympathetic to it. But the first thing that you want to call it is the kind of conditions they're calling for are Narnia style conditions, not because they're bad, they're good conditions that in theory, in a world where these things actually work, which we do not live in, might make sense, but they're hopelessly complex. And they are embedded in an enforcement regime that will never succeed in enforcing them. These things have loopholes that you could drive, one of those crazy, what's that, the Mad Max movie? The what's
Right.
the Mad Max? So not even
With
like a big
with Tina
rig.
Turner hanging off
Yeah.
the edge of it.
Oh
Yeah.
no, the new one, the amazing
Oh
one with the
yeah,
da, da,
yeah,
da, da, da,
yeah.
da, da,
Right.
you could drive one of those rigs through, right? These loopholes. And so again, Chair Khan was one of the most aggressive, no nonsense antitrust enforcers we've ever seen, right? Since the 1960s and 50s. Okay. Even in the world where she was at the head of the FTC and I was serving alongside her, it took us literal years to enforce consent decrees that just said, thou shalt not buy this gas station in St. Petersburg, Florida, right? You
Specifically,
think
this one with this address.
specifically, right, with this address that you signed on the dotted line, you shall not buy without calling this first. What I want to stress to anyone thinking like, ¿por qué no los dos? Right? Like, why can't, we may not block it. Maybe don't just let it through. Why don't we just get in the middle? Right? Like, no, we can't have our cake and eat it too. I understand why, especially IATSE. I have minimal engagement with DGA. I know a couple members, but I have a real empathy for the members of IATSE who are the blue collar backbone of the film and television industry. With respect, the individuals who crafted this letter very evidently have never enforced one of these settlements or been near enforcement of one of these settlements. And that is the alarms I want to set off for anyone in this milieu who is trying to make sense of it.
But most of us, even though we're trying really hard,
Right,
do not understand how
right.
antitrust enforcement works, right?
Marge, I don't still fully understand what a grip is. So like I'm not going to tell you how to make a movie or a TV show. In the same way, like I just can't stress enough, settlements do not work the way this letter envisions them to. And the people who get screwed are not the companies entering into the settlements. It's the people who the settlements are supposed to protect. That is the long and short of what everyone needs to understand.
Okay. And we have a very good piece from your colleague at American Economic
Yes.
Liberties that is going to be posted somewhere above us on this website. And I think it's a really good idea. It's not too deep, it's not too like
Yes.
jargony, but it does lay out beat by beat over time, whatever the industry, this is the pattern we see over and over again, which I think is what, people need to kind of grasp. The path we're on currently is that the AGs have determined the markets where they feel they have the clearest impact of consolidation. And
Right.
they've brought this to a judge, and the judge has seen enough merit to temporarily block this thing. And then
Yeah.
both parties said, okay, fine, let's just go to trial. And then the judge decided the adequate amount of time you're going to need to be ready for that trial. And I'm going to set the date in March, right? And everybody agreed to that.
Right.
Now we're in, so if that case goes forward, and ultimately the AGs and the WGA or some combination thereof are successful in their case, and the judge blocks the merger,
Yeah.
then all these other communities who have concerns, who are not in the case, will also have the merger blocked, right? So the merger gets
Correct.
blocked. It makes it,
Yes.
my concerns as a documentary filmmaker are included in the blocking of that merger. If concessions and deals are made, there's a lot of smaller people in this ecosystem, like independent filmmakers, documentary filmmakers, independent journalists. They don't really have the weight or the money or the lawyers to go in and make these deals in the same way, right? So I guess what I'm trying to have you explain to me is letting the trial play out feels like the most reasonable thing. Is that how you feel?
Absolutely. In terms of helping the most people in the greatest range of roles in film and television, blocking this merger outright is going to protect the most people.
I'm curious in other industries where you have experience. From my position, looking at this merger, it feels like an age-old Hollywood thing of like the creatives who generate the work versus the business side of the deal, right? Who sort
Yeah,
of like make the things happen. So it feels to me
yeah,
like a bunch of sort of kingmakers, gatekeepers, power
yeah,
brokers versus a bunch of creatives who have different
yes.
interests. And I'm curious if that shows up in other industries where the harm of the thing go like the people who are egging on the deal making maybe are more beholden to their shareholders and their own like stratosphere than they are to the communities who are being served by the thing. Is that a typical dynamic that you see in mergers?
I think you may be remembering this. We had in the course of this effort an Iowa soybean grower and a cow-calf operator say, "Hey, what's happening in Hollywood happened to us. All of our inputs consolidated, all of our buyers consolidated. We got stuck in the squeeze in the middle." A lot of farmers, look at themselves as stewards of the land. They care about the livestock they raise, and they can't do their jobs. They can't keep their families afloat with all this upstream and downstream consolidation. So absolutely, you see merger after merger where the fat cats who are going to get rich off of points on the deal or whatever say rah rah rah. This will be good for industry. This will be good for efficiency. This will rise all tides, float all boats. The reality is, if you're in the middle, you get screwed. You see that all the time.
One of the things that's been bugging me, Alvaro, is that the case is currently in front of a federal judge in Oakland, right? And she has made considerations and rulings thus far, and she has found enough merit in this case to hear it, right? And I'm sort of troubled by the idea that don't what we want in this country is a functioning system where both parties can take their case and their economics and their data and their lawyers and argue and make their best case to the judge and let the judge hear that and
Right.
decide, like have the day in court. Isn't that a better outcome than lots of folks from our industry who don't fully understand this trying to opine about what the solutions should be?
If you are worried about what this merger is going to do to film and television and your job in film and television, what you should want is for the legal process to proceed. Why? We are before a judge that Paramount itself has stipulated is free of any appearance of bias. That judge has said that she just looked at one market that the state attorneys general pled. She found compelling evidence there was a law violation. She has ruled against Paramount already. Paramount is on its back foot. They were saying this thing is going to sail through, no problem. We won't agree to pause it. They have lost the motion for the temporary restraining order. They have voluntarily agreed to pause this thing until June of next year. And the judge has gone out of her way to describe some of that evidence as compelling. And so right now, we are on a path for this merger to be blocked because it is illegal, and a judge that Paramount stipulated was unbiased has suggested there's compelling evidence is illegal. And what I want to urge people to understand is that is the current default path we are on. And this world being outlined in broad strokes by these Wall Street financiers about, oh, you could have your cake and eat it too. You could get the best of both worlds. Just let this thing through. You're not going to get a better deal from these Wall Street billionaires cutting some settlement agreement than you are from a federal judge that the parties have stipulated is unbiased, actually looking at the merits of this case. I think we want the legal process to go forward. We are in a good place when it comes to that process. Obviously, I can't promise an outcome one way or another, but this clearly seems to be the best path to protect everyone who's going to be hurt by the merger.
It's kind of how we do things in this country, right? We have a system of laws, and if laws are broken, law enforcement officers, including the AGs, have to point out that the law is being broken here. We think the law is going to be broken. We're going to take it to a court. I mean, that's, I'm an immigrant. You're an
Call me
immigrant.
old fashioned.
But
Call me
I
old
have a
fashioned, but
feeling that
it does seem like that's how it
when
should
we
work.
became
Yes.
citizens, we had to like study how the structure of the United States worked.
Right.
And I learned that
You
we had a
forgot the billionaire
system.
clause. There's a billionaire clause where if it hurts the billionaires, they get their own special system. But no, this is how it's supposed to work, and this is how it is working. So maybe we should let it play out its course.
Yeah. Okay. Two last questions, Alvaro. As a non-billionaire, what is the most useful thing I can do to raise my voice and to sort of make it clear that I would like the system to play out and for the AGs and the WGA to have their day in court, and what comes out of that comes out of that. The judge will decide. What's the best way for me to raise my voice right now?
People outside of the industry don't really know, number one, that most people who work in film and television are blue collar people working blue collar jobs and maybe have a middle class income if they're lucky. Nor do they know that it's much broader than a particular corner of Los Angeles, that it's all across California, it's all across the country. So the first thing you can do is pick up the phone, log on social media, and talk about how great it is that your state attorney general is bringing this law. So urge them to not concede to anything. I think the hashtag is now no concessions, right? That's the number one thing you could do. Number two, consider telling your story online about why you personally are opposed to this merger so that this isn't just like elite media versus elite media.
Mm-hmm. And conflicted multi-billionaires who are making multi-billion dollars off of this deal, trying to take this. I mean, to me, it feels, I'm just going to say this, I might have to edit myself out, but what they want is to take it out of a court of law into the court of public opinion, where they can spend their millions and billions of dollars on PR companies and op-ed placement and conflicted fat cats, to use your word, right? To tell us what's good for us, right?
That that's that that's exactly what they're doing. They are trying to take this out of the court of law and into the court, not of public opinion, but of billionaires' opinion, right? They want to paint a picture that does not exist and cut a deal among themselves rather than let the force of law run its course in a Article 3 court as provided for in the Constitution, which is the way we're supposed to resolve these conflicts. That's exactly what's happening right now.
So, and while a lot of this conversation has been epicentered in Hollywood with creatives and whatever, Hollywood unions and whatever, actually everyone in the country who has television in their house is likely to be impacted by this as well. And I think a lot of consumers have a lot of concerns, because we all can see the patterns that we're seeing in our country right now, and folks don't want a handful of people to control what they see and how much they pay to see what they see and they enjoy. So we are very much inviting everyone now to join this call. It's not just about creatives, because it is about all of us. And if there's one thing that you want me to remember, to like lock in, so that I can tell my friends this or my family this over Thanksgiving dinner, or when it comes up in conversation, I have one really important and smart thing to say about this merger, what would you say that one thing is that everyone should remember?
No concessions. This idea that you can cut a deal, have your cake and eat it too, is not real, will fail, and it won't hurt. Centimillionaire David Ellison and centimillionaire David Zaslav, when it goes south, it will hurt you. It'll hurt everyone else who works in film and television. You will be stuck paying the bill for this deal that is going to take the place of an actual federal court considering this. So no concessions. Do not cut a deal. Let the law run its course.